All right, so here we go. I can read about the Aztecs. Should learn more. Because you guys already discussed and came to a consensus about your Mesoamerica card. And you did your spelling close court. So here we go. Page 32, please. You guys watched, Logan? Where's your book? You guys watched the video the other day? Yeah. And we learned a lot of things about the Aztecs. I thought it was interesting that they also did human sacrifices. Logan, we're waiting for you. Jojo, your table's waiting for you.
If you were giving my book back, I would say,
Your book is in your desk, Jojo. Your book is in your desk where it's organized. Okay. So I thought it was kind of interesting that they did human sacrifices too. But I thought it was interesting that they have city-states like the Maya do. And I thought it was kind of interesting that they have that again, like the rulers and the whatever. But what I really liked about it was the fact that in the Aztec world, women can hold some leadership positions. They couldn't be warriors and priests, but they can hold some leadership positions. So we're on page 32, please, Stephen. 32. We're not reading the myth. We're going to skip that. So here we go. Aztec City on water's edge. Have you ever heard of Mexico City? Thumbs up if you have, thumbs down if you haven't. Excuse me, I should thumbs up or down. Thanks. Did you know that this modern capital of Mexico was built on top of another city? And if you visit Mexico City today, you can see archaeologists at work. They're busy uncovering the ancient city of Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan was the capital of the Aztec Empire in the 1300s and 1400s. So in this time period, in like the 1300s and 1400s, that's where they were at. This empire existed for more than 500 years after the Maya abandoned their great inland city-states. The ancestors of the people now known as the Aztecs migrated from the north. And by 1325 CE, it settled, so here they are on the line, in the city of Mexico, up in here. Other people had lived in Mexico's fertile valley for thousands of years before the Aztecs arrived, and many groups were competing for space. The Aztecs had several temporary homes, all of which they were eventually forced to leave. The land the Aztecs finally claimed may seem an unlikely choice, two swampy islands in the middle of Lake Texcoco. So they decided to make their place that they're going to live kind of in the middle of swamps. So Aztec beginnings on the top in Lake Texcoco, that is our what do we call it?
Subject.
Subtitle. What is it called?
Subtitle.
On the lake shore, the Aztecs built mud huts and lived on food from the lake, frogs, fish, and algae. Doesn't sound hungry. They hunted deer, rabbits, coyotes, armadillos, and snakes. They raised bees, turkeys, and ducks, gathered grasshoppers and worms for food. Ew. They gathered grasshoppers and worms for food. I'm hoping it was for their animals.
Really good, actually.
I hope it was for their animals and not for them, because that just doesn't sound appetizing. Maybe it's
Grasshoppers are
actually really good. Kate, Sally, comment, concern, question. Discussion?
My country is
related to that book because when I was like 5 years old, my older cousin dared me to eat a worm and I did it.
The Aztec, and so we're on that second paragraph, the Aztec adapted to their swampy environments by creating habitable land from the lake bottoms, places they could live in, right? They built gardens called chinampas in the middle of Lake Texcoco. They built bridges over marshes and grew a variety of crops on the mainland as well. They cultivated corns, beans, squash, tomatoes, amaranth, and chilies. Members of the ruling class grew fruit trees in their small personal gardens, and crops grew throughout the year in Mesoamerica's tropical climate. As food supplies expanded to Tenochtitlan grew. So, do you guys see that picture down below there? So that was called, their gardening system was called a chinampa. What is it called?
Chinampa.
And you see how they kind of have canals and they have boats, so they kind of like built it up on the swamp and like planted stuff. And they would use their boats to kind of go from like garden piece to garden piece to garden piece. Okay? Gardens built from a lake bed. The Aztecs perfected a technique for building gardens in Lake Texcoco. First, they scooped up mud from the bottom of the shallow lake. Then they piled layers of mud and plants on top of one another. So water plants, that's what aquatic means, okay? They used reed posts to anchor these rectangular gardens to the lake floor. They planted willow trees along the border to help hold the artificially or false, right, filled lakeshore in place. A series of canals crossed the chinampas, providing a year-round source of water for crops. Fish and other aquatic or water life lived in the canals and were another source of food. So they made their gardens in the lake, which is kind of really impressive, no?
It's cool because they don't have to water it, because the water.
Right? Yeah, the water just is right there for them.
It is, so it's not really an essential.
Right? And so it's kind of a unique way to do things. So let's go ahead and turn the page, please. Okay, Tenochtitlan, a well-planned city. Tenochtitlan was laid out on a grid. Its streets and canals formed a pattern of squares. Its religious and ceremonial center was located in the heart of the city. This sacred precinct, which is area, or pyramid temple complex was much larger than those at the Mayan center. Stone walls carved with serpents, so what is another word for serpents? Snakes surrounded that precinct or that area. The Great Temple, or Temple Mayor, dominated the space inside the walls. On top of the Temple Mayor, the Aztecs built shrines to honor the two most important gods. One shrine was dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, I don't know, the sun god, and the other honored Tlaloc, the rain god. Wow, that's a mouthful of words. Social class determined where people lived. Oh wait, like the Mayas, right? Because they were closer to the temple, further out, and out on the farms. Aztec priests lived in the palaces within the sacred precinct, just outside the emperor, so that, like their king, and members of the noble class built carved stone palaces and beautiful gardens. Beyond its city center, Tenochtitlan was divided into 4 sections or quadrants. Each quadrant was divided into 20 capulan or districts, and each one by itself, called a capuli, had its own farm, marketplace, and school. Commoners, including merchants, artisans, and farmers, lived together in the capuli. They built their houses with sun-dried clay bricks called adobe. These one-story houses often had peaks, so like the kind of triangle-y, right? Thatched roofs, so that's like made of plant kind of stuff, fibers. Others had flat earthen roofs used for planting gardens. So could you imagine having your garden on your roof of your house?
Imagine going up there every day checking crops.
Right? It's definitely different. Sorry.
I've seen in the coast on our show where there's actually plants
Right.
there's on the top of the apartment.
Right? And I think it's still done today in some parts of the world. Many people also built domed mud huts outside their homes. They were used as sweat baths. The Aztec lit fires outside the huts to warm the walls. They entered the sweat baths once the inside walls became hot. They threw water against the heated walls and they produced steam. And it was similar to modern day steam baths and saunas. And then the caption says it took not long. Many people were employed to sweep streets and get rid of garbage. And each neighborhood had public toilets. Okay, so here's kind of what it would have looked like, you guys. So it said it was set up in quadrants. So there's a quadrant. If it's set up on grids,
It is,
it would have been like this. And their temple would have been smack dab in the middle. Okay, and then outside, each one would have its own little section, again, in grids. Okay, so put this, put your homework on page, the next page, put this in your desk, and we'll see you.